เช็คเสียงอะไรเรียบร้อยไปเลยครับเริ่มเลย
All right, so we already recapped the First Descendant broadcast going over season 4 yesterday. So what I want to do today is there was a 4.5 hour Q&A, live Q&A segment with the devs and some of the community content creators asking about the game, the future of the game, about season 4 and that sort of thing. So today I would like to summarize that. It was a crazy Wild West show. At one point they had asked 9 questions in a row without answering them and then tried to answer all 9 in a row. People were bouncing around. It was a lot. And so some of the questions as well, they were asked and then ignored because either they didn't recognize that it was a question or they weren't comfortable answering it. So we're going to go through that as well, but I'm going to summarize all the highlights, the things you need to know about this 4.5 doozy of a session, and kind of summarize some things that came from that as well. So that's what we're doing today. If you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live on twitch.tv/drybear. I'll see you there. First things first, let's meet the stars of this, the content creators and the developers. People that asked me, I've been asked a bunch of times. They did ask me to do this. I was just busy on the day that they asked, so I couldn't attend. So in this list here, on the top left, you have Exelisa, and then you have Ariane. What is I'm uncultured swine. I don't know how to read it in Korean, but this is one of the Korean content creators for the game. They have Low Budget Gaming in the top right. Bottom left is Sen Evades. In the middle is Song of Rays, and bottom right is 7TV, representing different regions of the game and different levels of the game, and have been playing a lot. A lot of people here have very, very extensive experience with the game overall. On the developer side, from left to right, on the far left here, this is Jason, the community manager. He handles interfacing with the community, summarizing things, and does a lot of translation for the live event as well. Next to him is the lead producer who was recently promoted to executive producer for the studio. The fact they're even going to EP level, I've mentioned this before, means they're probably looking to expand and grow, which means they're probably working, they've already probably started proofing out a pre-alpha version of a new game or a spin-off game. Usually that's where that would mean. You wouldn't really need an EP for like a small studio, a single studio, so it looks like they're expanding. In the middle is the creative director, so he handles a lot of the creative decisions and handles rules and directions for the game. A little bit different than game director, but he seems to be holding both roles right now. Next to him, this is where things get a little weird. So there are actually 4 core developers on the stream right here. There's 2 off camera, which I'll show in a second, and then these 2 here. Now, important thing to note, there are 4 lead game designers in this as well, which for me, as someone as an ex-developer, was very bizarre because you don't need 4 lead game designers unless you have like a 500-person studio or a very large project. So having this many leads at first to me was quite weird. However, after looking into it more, in South Korea, it is a very respect-driven industry and culture, and losing a title you've been granted, like going up and down in titles, is seen to be very much embarrassing or humiliating. And so there's a lot of people that have lead titles on this team, which is bizarre. Like if everyone's a chef, then who's preparing the pastries and stuff? Like too many chefs, not enough people working in the kitchen, that's kind of sort of thing. But I think it's just because they earned lead at some point and then they just refused to change titles after that. So they have a bunch of them there. There's also some in here that are just, at least to me, it just seems like a very scatterbrained approach to this, but again, it could just be a culture difference, and that is. So on the right here, this guy is the lead game designer. So taking the lead point on game design. Then you have lead content designer, which in my opinion, usually is more of like a art interfacing role, which is like dealing with artists and skins and things like that. So he's the lead content designer. Then on the left here, these 2 guys, these are probably more core developers. They introduced both of these guys as both being the lead combat designer. So I don't know if they're like co-lead or it's that cultural thing where that you know, once you get a lead title, they never want to take it away from you because it's humiliating. And so they just got moved from another project where they were a lead and they just kind of worked together. So you have 2 lead combat designers, a lead game designer, a lead content designer, the creative director, and the executive producer, plus the community manager, and then the translator on the call as well. So that is like the whole set of what this Q&A was. And what they did is they just went through questions. It was very scatterbrained because what they did is for several segments, they would go through like 2 or 3 content creators, have them each ask like 2 or 3 questions, build up all the questions, and then shoot it to the devs, and they would just freeform respond, which means that a lot of the questions got ignored or got like lost in the shuffle, where they were good questions, they just didn't get answered because of the format. So we're not going to do it that way. I'm just going to go through question and answer one by one, and we'll talk a little bit about the ones that got forgotten that we didn't get an official answer on as well. Okay, the Q&A opened up by asking the creative director, what are the top priorities for the game? What are you guys focusing on? What are your key metrics that you're looking for in this? And so the quick summary of what he stated stated here is their top priority is trying to implement sticky content, which means content that you do with a smile on your face repeatedly over and over, and you're enjoying it. It makes you come back and do it, right? Rather than the content that we've seen sometimes where new dungeon comes out, you do it for a couple days, then you finish it, you get the weapon, and then you're done. It's not sticky, it doesn't keep you coming back, the retention isn't there. So their priority is gonna be player retention. They said that they wanna focus on gameplay that is dull and or repetitive, which is kind of back to that stickiness, which is a complaint that a lot of people in the community have. So overall, I think that's right in the light line. And he's also said that they want to bring more variety, and they also want to fix the stagnated meta. So right now, we're kind of playing a lot of a couple characters as well. So, you know, like Inez, Bunny, Viessa, Harris are just, you know, Glay are at the top, and then you can't really play too many of the other characters or weapons at the hardest level of content. So they want to kind of focus on that, and they want to bring more variety and retention-driven things as well as part of the experience, which I think most people agree are good metrics to focus on for them right now. Next, I will quickly cover the things that were brought up repeatedly and ignored every single time. So some of these, especially the Ancestor modules, was brought up by several different askers and also was just ignored every single time and just outright dodged. And that is one is there's a lot of feedback around Ancestor modules being unfair, mainly for like leaderboard calculations, people that have very strong Ancestor modules that can outperform other people by a wide degree. How much power they provide, and that having a good Ancestor module can be in some cases night and day between having a bad one as well. And also the pay-to-win aspect about the fact that someone can come in, spend a bunch of money, get a very good Ancestor module, and then for the same reasons be stronger than someone else. This was brought up probably 5 or 6 times, was ignored every single time. So it sounds like they are happy with the way that is. I'm guessing that they are making a fair amount of money from people buying trigger modules on the market, and it's also why they are planning to expand the trade system to be offline and are also adding transcendent weapons, which can be bought and sold as well. So it seems like they are getting an acceptable amount of income from it. They're happy with the way that it is, and they're all also, as is with many online Korean games, they are selling power in this case, and so that was something that was dodged every single time, so I don't expect that answer to show up in this summary. They also were asked many times about bullet sponge enemies, especially around like the new bounty system, just enemies being generally very high in HP. That one was dodged every single time. They also dodged any ideas around reducing research time or queuing up multiple researches in a row. All of those were dodged, but there's a lot of other good things to talk about, so let's move on from the ones that we won't be talking about to the next. Now let's just start rapid firing all the things they did answer. One of the questions was, will we see new modes, and can we see just new ways to engage in the game? And the answer was yes. Trials is a good example of this on the roadmap. They have Trials coming out with Season 4, which is going to be a roguelite kind of mode that we can play in the game, and they also are planning with the Mega Dungeon that's coming in the Season 4 update, will also be a lot of randomness in the dungeon. They mentioned having mechanics that you can do to weaken the boss. We already have a couple of these, like in Void Vessel, you can extend your time. There's droppable weapons in Sigma Sector, or some of the power-ups and bonuses you get in Onslaught, but it sounds like they want to do more of those. We'll just have to see if they can balance them correctly for them to be, you know, not completely useless or not completely broken, at least somewhere in the middle, but that is what they're looking for. They are going to continue adding in more modes. Next, I believe it was Sen that brought this one up, but he mentioned that, like, can we be more careful about invalidating old content? This is a big question the community has had for a very long time, because the trailer for the launch version of the game had us fighting Colossus out in the open field. That never really took place. And then there's also just been modes and maps that they come out and then they just get deprecated because they don't get updated at all. They have been doing better about getting us back into the environments that have been lost, but in general it was brought up like, hey, what is your thoughts about invalidating modes or paths or gameplay loops that just don't get new maps, they don't get new content, they don't get new loot, they don't get updated at all, and they just slowly fade into obscurity because they were left behind? And their response was they agree it's an issue. They also recognize that it is a strain on matchmaking if there's too many things to do, and there might be ways to solve this in general with the Descendant board that does help it a little bit. They also talked about how when they add a new material farm that's better than an old one, it will invalidate it, right? So if you need to go get your materials, maybe you do it from like bounty farming, or maybe you do it from a specific dungeon that came out that has it. And if there's the same material dropping in multiple places, one's always gonna be the best. However, they did mention, at least in this, now they've changed their minds many times on things in the past, but they mentioned, and this is a quote, "We will maintain what we release, which means that they do not plan to deprecate any old content. So like Sigma Sector, 400% dungeons. I mean, obviously they removed invasions, but in general, they said going forward, their goal is to maintain anything that come out that they release. And that means adding new maps, adding new modes, adding new things to the experience over time, which they went on further to say that they will, as they showed with the roadmap, will be adding a new map to Onslaught. So it's not just the same map that we've been playing on. And they also mentioned that Onslaught difficulty 4 is going to be added as well. This one has a bunch of questions that spawns from this because there's a lot of people. I mean, they showed in this broadcast that less than 1% of their overall player base has completed Onslaught level 3. Now, if you shorten that cohort to be just people that have full builds or MR 30 plus, you probably get that number up. But if you include all the people that log in for any amount of time throughout a month period inside of TFD, around 1% or slightly less than that have actually completed the last wave of Onslaught level 3. So with that, they're going to be adding an Onslaught level 4. There's a lot of questions on how hard does that get? What enemies are they using? Does that react with the map? But at the very least, they confirmed they're working and will release Onslaught level 4, and there's a new Onslaught map coming in, which plays into the invalidating old modes question. Now, like me, Ori Biscuit, another member of the community, was busy for this and couldn't provide, but she actually put in a video with a single question in it, which is a great question. The question was materials and ease of farming. Materials can sometimes be very obtuse and hard to get, or they're just kind of repetitive in the rate that you get them. Think about like Void Vessel. When the swords first came out, you had to run like 800 of the same Void Vessel just to get the materials. So Biscuit's question was, hey, can we alleviate that a little bit? And the response to her question was, we want to reduce single source drops. And what they mean by that is they don't want, going forward, they don't want a material to only have one location that you can get it from. They want at least 2, if not more. And they've kind of been making good on that with the new weapon that just launched and various other things that are in the game. There's at least two places to get something. So if you get sick of one and it feels repetitive, you can go do the other, which they have been doing with some of the most recent weapons. They also mentioned that for Raven specifically, when she comes out in 6 weeks for season 4, they want the efficiency of farming to be related to the difficulty of the content that you're completing, which means that the higher difficulty, maybe Raven will come from Onslaught 4 or something like that. The higher the difficulty of the content is, the more efficient the material farm would be. And they also said that lots of content will drop the Transcendent weapons, not just one location. So if you wanted to get Transcendent weapons, you can be able to do lots of different things, go to lots of different activities and find those dropping. And because we're going to be just like the Ancestor mods, dropping them a lot, that's super useful. And right now we obviously have many places to find Ancestor mods as well. Wall Crasher, Onslaught, various other events and things like that. So all of that sounds pretty good. There's a great question from Low Budget Gaming who asked, hey, we have breach tracking. It's supposed to be the material farming mode. Can we add more materials to breach tracking and can we make it more efficient so you get more out of it? And the response from that was, we're going to be adding a new amorphous material that has a brand new key that will get you materials from a different location. So it sounds like they don't plan to expand the breadth that exists in breach tracking and the amount that you get from it. They're just going to introduce a new activity that requires a new key, a new AM. I wasn't super pleased with this response, but you let me know what you think about this one down below. He also had another good question, which was, hey, the new player experience still needs a lot of work, which is if you're a brand new player jumping into the game, there's definitely some progression issues of where you were, like doing the hard mode Colossus and dungeons before, and then being thrown into Axion Plains where there's that huge difficulty jump in the amount of HP and damage the enemies have, that sort of thing. There's a big question around that, and the response wasn't super encouraging. Obviously, NPE is new player experience is something that you always are trying to improve over time, but their response was, we will do another boost path. So if you never got to do the boost path before, it was this event where you could actually get a free bunny, and then it gave you modules and taught you how to play bunny and gave you some power-ups for it, and then gave you some rewards along the way. They did a boost path with Bunny initially, was really good. They did a second one, which was only for new players, and veterans got nothing from it, and they're going to be doing another one. And they also highlighted that in the new roguelite trial mode, there will be an option to play a free built-out character. So Maybe you don't have Dia built out in the mode, you can set it to trial option and it'll give you a pre-built Dia that you can try out. At least in their opinion, they think that's going to help new players understand how to build a character. I still think there's a lot that can be done on helping new players onboard into the game and also get over the Axiom Plains difficulty jump, which by the way, there's going to be another one after Axiom Plains with the Cradle of Evolution, which is going to be another jump over that. So they're going to have more NPE bumpiness, but having a new boost event is going to be cool. And also trying out free characters in the trial thing probably will be pretty cool. I don't know if it's going to teach new players how to build characters, but at least gives them an option to feel what it feels like to have a fully built character, assuming that they give us the right ones. Then Songs of Rage had a bunch of really great questions. He did an awesome job with this, but one of the ones that came up, he didn't use these words, but this is what he was getting at. He said, can we get more interesting level design, which is like the developer way to say it, but he was saying that, hey, the new Bastion dungeon has a lot of verticality where you jump up on the platforms, you have immunity, there's new mechanics. Like, can we get level design that uses verticality more and goes up and down and side to side and goes into tunnels? Can we keep that being where the direction we're going in? And the developer says, yes, the new Bastion dungeon is the direction they're moving into. And they also, that's what they were looking for. So Bastion is the new direction moving forward for dungeons, including new mechanics and verticality. And they also said that the mega dungeon boss for the new mega dungeon, the Corel Mothership in Season 4, has gimmicks and new mechanics as part of that. Now, again, you can think about the old invasions where you have to destroy the pillars or, you know, getting the timer increase on Void Vessel. I'm sure we're gonna get more of those kind of things. Gimmicks are always tough. Sometimes they can be super frustrating. Sometimes they can be super fun and interesting. We'll just have to see where that comes from. But the big idea there is that they want to do more Bastion-like dungeons, if you like the new Bastion dungeon. And also they want to do more gimmicks and mechanics that make the experience different as you're going through dungeons, like the new Mega Dungeon that we haven't played yet. Next set had a bunch of questions around gameplay in general. Let's just kind of roll through these really quick. His first question was, hey, AM rerolls take forever and sometimes you never get the roll that you want. And so he said, could we get a option to lock one of the stats when we re-roll the AM like we do with the stat rerolls on weapons? And the answer was no. And this was a question that was brought up by both Seven and Sen through the process. But hey, since Ancestor mods are largely unfair and the gap is pretty crazy where someone who has a god rolled AM is always going to be first place on the leaderboard, there's nothing you can do about it. Can we have a separate leaderboard where there's a leaderboard where you can use an AM and a leaderboard where you can't use an AM? And they said, we have no plans of doing that. Sounds cool. We'll
ไอ้เหี้ยตรงเนี้ยผมนั่งทะเลาะกับฝรั่งเว้ยในแชทกูจำได้เลยไอ้เหี้ยเซนมันแค่แบบแบบมึงครีเอทลีดเดอร์บอร์ดเอ้ยเซเว่นอะเซเว่นบอกมึงทำลีดเดอร์บอร์ด2แบบได้ไหมไอ้เหี้ยแล้วแชทข้างๆมันก็แบบมึงจะทำลีดเดอร์บอร์ด2แบบทำเหี้ยอะไรมันไม่มีใครเล่นอยู่แล้วไม่มันมีคนเล่นมันมีคนจำนวนไม่น้อยเล่นด้วยไอ้เหี้ยแล้วก็มันอยากต้องการลีดเดอร์บอร์ดหนึ่งอะมี AM ก็มีไปมึงก็ใช้ AM ตีไปถูกปะไอ้เหี้ยไล่ลีดเดอร์บอร์ดหนึ่งอะก็คือไม่ต้องมี AM
think about it. That was the only answer that they gave us. So at least it's in their minds now that maybe there could be 2 leaderboards, one for AMs and one for not, but nothing. The director went on to reiterate, at least from their design perspective, that all content in the game is made to be completable without an Ancestor module. It's like, to the best of their ability, they're trying to make it so that you don't need the power of an Ancestor module in order to complete it. So at least in his opinion, it doesn't matter that the AMs give you a lot of power because you don't need them to complete it. And he was kind of in a roundabout way saying this is like a 1% problem, which I do think that there are going to be a lot of people in the comments down below that agree with that sentiment that, you know, being in the top 10 of a leaderboard is not something most players care about or even, you know, want to be on. And so there might be like a mismatch of community in that, or like some people just don't care about this issue, but at least it's on their mind and they're thinking about it. Another great question is, can we increase or change the acquisition rate of Ancestor modules? Depending on how fiendish you are about getting AMs, you might think that there's too much, or you might think that there's too little, but the response to this was no. They have no plans to change the acquisition rate of getting new Ancestor modules, but they will continue doing these adjustment events that we're in right now where it lowers the cost or gives you rates, or they give you those little rings that allow you to get a guaranteed stat roll of a certain quality. They're gonna keep playing with that, but they have no intentions of changing the rate at which you acquire Ancestor modules. Next, Sen had some questions around the Transcendent weapons in the game. 2 of them were asked, one was ignored. I forgot to mention this earlier. There was a question that he asked of, How will the reroll fairness be for the Transcendent weapons relative to the Ancestor modules? Well, I think a lot of people in the community would agree that Ancestor modules, largely, most of the time when you reroll them, you don't get a good result. Like, the vast majority of the rolls are not useful in any shape or form. And so his question was, will the Transcendent weapons be the same unfairness or roll accuracy as the Ancestor modules, or different? And they dodged the question entirely, so it probably will be the same. The next question was a great follow-up, which was, what about the fairness of getting Transcendent weapons? And there's going to be acquisition of getting the Transcendent weapons when they drop. If you don't know, the Transcendent weapon system is going to be all about, you drop a Transcendent weapon, it will roll a rarity on that weapon, then that rarity will determine how strong the passive ability is on the weapon, and then you will get 2 sub ability slots that will give you stats on that weapon as well. And so Sen was like, okay, is that gonna be fair? Like, how is that gonna be? And the response was, Transcendent weapons will be primarily drops, which means they don't, at least in their theory crafting, they don't want you to be re-rolling Transcendent weapons as often as you do Ancestor modules. So the re-roll rate, at least in their opinion, will be lower. We'll have to see if that actually turns out to be the case, because sometimes they say one thing and then when we get a hold of it, it actually is something else. But that's what they said, and they also said that the Transcendent weapons, the substats can be re-rolled, but they said there might be some restrictions on how much you can do it and how much you have to do it in order to get a good roll, that sort of thing. Another great question is, hey, can we get a racing mode? We have hover bikes, you have these racing events in Axiom Plains that are one-time completion, then you never do them again. You include hover bikes in pretty much all of the modern content, Axiom Plains, Axiom Infiltration Operations, like all that stuff. You can get on your hover bike, and it's a big core part of the game. Can we get a racing mode? I mean, there are plenty of games out there, like, you know, Gotcha RPGs, Wuthering Waves just did a big racing mode. It wasn't the best because it's not like a Forza level game, but it was still functional and relatively fun, and you could race and get times on it. So the question was, can we get a racing mode that gives rewards? Or you can, at least in my opinion, having a racing mode would be great, because it means that it would give you a reason to customize your bike. Other people can see your bike, and then you can display it as well, like have like an Onslaught intro animation where everyone's riding up on their bikes and getting ready and getting to the starting line, and you can show off your customization. It gives you a reason to buy hover bike skins. It gives you a reason to use hover bike paints and things like that. So they asked, hey, Sen was like, hey, can we get a racing mode? And the response was, no, we don't think that we're able to. So the general idea here was that they tried this internally, apparently. They proofed it out and blocked it out, and they felt that the way their hover bikes are implemented now are not up to a level that they're happy with for a racing mode. I feel like, at least in my opinion, that they're just kind of making this more complicated than it needs to be. There are lots of games out there that have very like weak racing modes. They're just generally fun, goofy modes. Warframe has a
ไอ้เหี้ยโหมดแข่งรถนี่ก็เหมือนกันไอ้เหี้ยแม่งตอบว่าเป็นไปไม่ได้เลยที่เราจะทำไอ้เหี้ยเดฟแล้วมันก็แบบอ้าวไอ้เหี้ยละเกมอื่นทำไมเขาทำได้อะพี่มันทำแบบขำๆมามึงรางวัลก็ขำๆก็ได้แบบได้มีอะไรทำถ้าเวลาอย่างน้อยเอามาลดเวลาคราฟก็ยังดีถูกปะโหมดแข่งรถอะไอ้เหี้ยแม่งเลือกที่จะไม่ทำแม่งเลย
racing mode. Tons of Gotcha RPGs have racing modes. A lot of online games have racing modes. Sometimes Counter-Strike has a racing mode. Just very basic things, but at least in their opinion, they tried it and they felt like their hover bikes weren't good enough for a racing mode, so they don't plan on doing it, at least in the short term. Next was a big question by Seven, which is something that's been asked ever since the beta of the First Descendant, is can we get clans, or can we get guilds, or can we get a social structure where we can band together with our friends and like-minded human beings and have a cool decoration and a name, and we can see who's online in our clan and stuff like that? So he's like, can we get guilds slash clans slash dojos, or whatever you want to call it? And the response was pretty emphatic. We don't think guilds are a good fit for the First Descendant right now, which I don't know if he was thinking that we wanted clans to be more than just a social feature. I think they could, in the future, they could do like just having the ability to join clans, invite people from your clan, have a clan chat, and things like that may help people make groups and stuff like that. And I also think they could probably do like a clan lounge that maybe you could sell stuff there and do things like that could work. But they said that they don't think it's a good fit for TFD, and they also came out and said that they don't really have the resources to work on a clan guild system. So if you're expecting guilds or clans to be anytime soon, don't get your hopes up. Next up, Elisa had a great question that has been burning the back of my mind. If I was there, I probably would have asked this as well. His question was, what's the balance strategy? Like, how do you determine that a new character, a new weapon, a new module, or a rework is balanced and good. What are your metrics for that? How do you determine that? How do you go about, figuring out whether you should ship it or not? Which is a great question because we like the variance in the results we get is all over the place, right? You get like the Viessa rework, gangbusters, really good, fit the character, really balanced. Inez rework, she's the best character in the game right now. Bunny rework, she's the best character in the game right now. Really, really good. And then we get things like the Enzo rework or the, I think the Valby rework wasn't so great. Some people disagree. The Sharon rework, in my opinion, was just a complete mess. And so there's a question of like, how do you determine, or like, for example, Keelan comes out and they had to buff Keelan by about 12,000% before he was viable. So how are you testing internally to determine whether a character is good or not, whether a build is good or not? Like, what are your metrics for that? And the response was, in my opinion, it had some good things to it, but it was missing a lot of context. They said that they use dungeon clear time, usage rate, and onslaught to determine whether something is balanced or not. I think that this is a very broad answer that needs to be contextualized because if you say usage rate, you have to control what cohort you're talking about, right? Like if you give out a free bunny, the usage rate of bunny is going to be way higher because every account owns bunny, which means that they're going to be using bunny. And in a game where acquisition of characters and items is a part of the progression, usage rate can be very misleading, right? So for example, people may not have Hypernova because they weren't around during the battle pass for that weapon. And if it's not in the shop with the guy in Albion, they're not going to be using it in the usage rate. So does that mean that Hypernova is too weak and needs to be buffed, right? There's a lot of questions that go into that. Dungeon clear time can matter a lot as well, because like what if I go into a 4-man dungeon as a naked Ajax with no modules and I'm in a group with 3 other Inezes that are fully built out and my dungeon clear time is like 48 seconds? Does that mean that Ajax needs to be nerfed because I got a dungeon clear time that was really fast even though I didn't do anything, right? There's a lot of this stuff just gets really, and onslaught to balance is important too, because if I get the 900% outgoing damage buff in one onslaught and the next onslaught I roll status immunity, obviously onslaught performance is going to vary a lot by the buffs that you get.
อลิซ่ามันชกนี่หว่าไปเลยพี่หนวด
Again, it's a
พี่หนวด
very
กลายเป็นคน
basic
ดีแล้ว
answer that
ได้
needs
ยังไง
a
วะ
lot of contextualizing to understand how they're balancing, but at least we got a little bit of an answer there. They also mentioned that the reworks that they do for the characters take 4 months. So they start planning those reworks 4 months in advance. So I guess the team worked on the Sharon rework for 4 months straight before shipping it. That's their timeline. And they also said that they want to diversify the strength of characters and they want to add encounters that don't need DPS. They have tried this many times. I think it would be awesome if we had builds that were support or characters that could destroy RK shields or characters that could delete tyrants or something without having to deal damage to them. More ways to deal with enemies and encounters that isn't just DPS. They said that they want to do that. They've tried many times. I don't think they've ever been truly successful at that. You think about like the invasions, they think about like Deathstalker, you think about some of the Void Vessel requirements. It all always comes down to DPS at the end of the day, but this is what they're looking at, so you can draw your own conclusions on this. I had a lot of questions on dungeon clear time, usage rate, and stuff like that for balancing. And maybe, maybe we need more answers there, or maybe they just didn't want to elaborate, but that was the answer that they gave. Next up, Seven asked a great question, which I think has been on a lot of people's minds over the last 8 months or so, but we have seen a trend so far where character identity has been slowly being chipped away, right? Glay used to be the gun descendant, and now they've added gun builds for Jaber, for Bunny, for Inez, right? Like everyone's getting a gun build. So now every character can have a gun build, a hybrid build, and a skill build, and they're kind of homogenizing the identity of every character where everyone can do everything. And so Seven's question, which is a great one, is character identity going away? Do we no longer want the gun platform character, and do we want the fast character, and do we want the character that goes in the air? Like those sort of things, are those slowly going to be removed from the game as we start making sure that everyone is capable of doing everything? And the response, I'm paraphrasing here, the response that I got was, we want more identity. And their response, and I'm gonna summarize this as they're just confused, because their response was, we have not been removing identity at all. In fact, we've been making all the characters more different from each other, and we're spreading that out more and more. Every new update, the characters are getting more and more unique from each other with every update, which and I'm not trying to be facetious here or kind of be a doomer, but I don't feel that in the updates we've been receiving over the last year. It feels like very intentionally that they are bringing all the characters in line with each other and making them more and more similar, right? We no longer have, like, Inez used to be the skill descendant. She was, in their own words, you know, about a year and a half ago, they said that they want all skill descendants to be like Inez. And there were skill descendants and gun descendants, right? And then we had that separation. And over the last year, they've been giving the skill descendants, like Inez has a great gun build. In fact, the gun build for Inez, in a lot of cases, is better than some of the gun descendants that exist in the game, and vice versa, right? Glay has the skill build, and you know, there's like they keep adding these things that keep making the capabilities and the identity of every character kind of mushing together and being very similar. So Seven asked, hey, is this the plan? Like, are you planning to make sure that, you know, make it an even playing field where every character can do everything and there isn't like a unique identity where a character can do a thing that no one else can do, or they're really good at something better than anyone else? And their response was, no, we've been doing that. Every character we release, every rework we do is in line with that. And so that answer, in my opinion, was very confused because I haven't experienced that at all. They have been, you know, like Harris is kind of like a melee skill descendant, and they want, you know, Serena to be the flying character. So they do still have those concepts for characters, but with every rework, with every new update, with every new character, with the addition of modules, especially red modules, that has kind of been going away. Haley used to be the sniper descendant that plays from a distance. And then they added Cold Heart, the red module for Haley, that took away her sniper rifle, took away her lock-in, took away her chill, and then gave her a spherical AoE that's just like an Ajax or a Bunny or whatever else, right? And so they kind of, which solved a lot of Haley's problems when it comes to mobbing, but also kind of removed her identity of what she does and how she plays. And so again, they mentioned specifically like, no, we're doing identity, we love identity, it's all we're focused on, but I personally have not been experiencing that in the trend that's going. But let me know what you think. Do you feel like they have been trying to make each character unique in what they do, different from every other character, different from every other build? Or have you also been feeling like the character identity has been getting more and more constrained with the reworks and updates, and based on their response of they disagree and identity has not been going away, do you feel like that was, you know, accurate to the experience that you're having in the game? And I also feel like they're doing this because, like, for example, there was an issue before where like Serena and Glay, when a new weapon came out, would be really strong. Since then, they've added like 6 or 7, don't say it, different gun descendant builds for characters that used to be skill descendants. So again, if all the characters in the game can be gun descendants, it's a lot easier to balance when a new gun comes out, and maybe that's what they've been secretly going for, but you let me know what you think. Next up, Ariana, which, Ariane, I'm probably butchering that, sorry, I'm uncultured. He had like great questions about gameplay in general. A lot of the questions got skipped, unfortunately, or, you know, didn't have direct answers, but one that did get an answer was, he was asking, hey, can we get more expressiveness in the build system for reactors? Because right now, you just get a reactor that matches your element and matches your type, and then you choose from a small list of stats, and that's the end of the day. And so he was saying, hey, can we get more reactor types, more reactor modules, more ways to play around with a reactor, things we can customize to make that better? And the response was, no, we don't plan on doing that. Instead, they said that we're gonna focus instead on adding more external components and balancing external components. So it was kind of like a huge, you know, 90-degree turn away from the question. But if you're wondering if there's more reactor stuff on the way, they currently don't have that planned, but they said that they're gonna continue looking at the balance of external components, which, to be fair, there are a lot of gaps in external components. There's still not a very good electric external component set. There's a couple sets that need to have stats. Like we now have stats for like MP and skill power, but there needs to be more that work for every element and every type and every bonus. Maybe, you know, keep adding more and keep balancing the ones that are out of date so we can improve that. So I'm glad at least they're looking at that. Next up, we know that Serena is getting 2 new red mods with the upcoming season 4 launch. And of course, the Serena guy, Sen, asked, can you tell us what those Serena mods are like? And so they gave us a brief description. So here are the 2 red mods coming for Serena. The first one is a skill build for Serena. She definitely needs that. And it is built around a mid-air strike. Now, the way this reads to me, at least, is Serena has that air dash where she can dash around in the air. It's possible that turns into like the shoulder tackle that Kyle has, where you can shoulder tackle, but you're in the air. So that's what they described it. It's like a mid-air strike that you can do repeatedly that does skill damage. it makes sense to me that that would just be her air dash turned into an offensive ability. And then the second one is a single target build. And they didn't really specify if this was skill or gun, because obviously you can run gun Serena with a good single target weapon, and there's your single target build. For the longest time until Glay got buffed, everyone used Serena on Wall Crasher, which is a single target encounter. They'll still be able to use Serena to kill bosses, but I guess the second mod is going to be a single target build focus. They didn't give more details than that. Is that going to be like the hypothermia with building dot stacks? Is that going to be a skill-based single target? Is it going to be a hybrid build with guns? Is it going to be a gun-based build that's focused more on single target? We'll have to see, but those are the two Serena mods that are on the way. Next question came from Elisa, which is another great question. I think it's a question that a lot of people in the community have been asking for a long time. People have been wanting the MMO trifecta of tank, healer, DPS in this game. Anytime that has existed, it has been very problematic for a lot of reasons, but we still have situations where you can run Eugen and Deathstalker or Onslaught, and it works really well. So the question from Elisa was, will we get roles back in the game, tank, healer, DPS? And this one was this could have been a translation issue, but they said that they don't want roles in the game. They're going to be adding Descendant jobs, which I feel like, depending on the context, those two words are synonyms. They mean the same thing, right? Like, are classes in World of Warcraft different than jobs in Final Fantasy? No, they're the exact same thing. It's just a different noun that's being used to describe it. And so when they say we're not bringing roles back, we're going to be adding jobs, like, does that mean that Bunny's going to be an executive assistant and Ajax is going to be a fry cook? Like, there's just a lot of questions of what that means. If it's not roles, it's jobs. Like, are we saying that they're not a tank, but maybe they have the ability to absorb? I don't know what that means. They didn't elaborate further on this. They just said that they don't want roles. They're going to be adding jobs in the future, so you can speculate on what that actually means. Next, another great question from LBG was, hey, farming 5 duplicates of every weapon is exhausting, and with Transcendent weapons coming along, are you planning to make any changes to the ultimate weapons? Which is a great, astute question. What is the plan? And the response was, we will nerf the ultimate weapon grind when the Transcendent weapons come out. Maybe not initially, but they plan to do that, which is, they said emphatically in no uncertain terms that they want the Transcendent weapons to be, if they're well rolled, better than the ultimate weapons, which, when we started getting ultimate weapons, the blue and purple weapons in TFD became invalidated. You would never use a purple or blue weapon if you had an ultimate weapon instead. And so if we're getting a new tier of weapons, I'm sure a lot of people have been asking this, what does that mean for ultimate weapons? I've had people on my daily streams come in and say, should I be even making and building and putting resources in ultimate weapons if Transcendent weapons are coming? And so they said they will plan to nerf the grind for ultimate weapons. Does that mean that you don't need 5 copies anymore? Does that mean the weapon cores come easier? They just said that they're going to reduce the grind for the ultimate weapons once the Transcendent weapons are out. Next, another excellent question. This is something that we've been wondering about for a very long time. So they didn't say this in the show, but if you know basic RPG culture, there is the idea of stat sticks, which is basically something that you hold that is you're not using it for its intended purpose. You're just holding it or equipping it so that you can get some kind of benefit from it, but you're not using it. And we have plenty of these in the game right now. Secret Garden, Peacemaker, Blue Beetle. A lot of these weapons don't ever get fired even a single time. You're using them for their unique ability to buff a skill build or something like that. So the question from LBG was, can we get more stat stick weapons? Because right now we don't have all of our bases covered, right? What if you're not, if you have like tech toxic for Secret Garden, Peacemaker gives you like non-attribute and things like that, but we don't have all of the elements covered. And even in cases of like chill Descendants, Clairvoyance has a lot of problems with it, and also Frostwatcher has a lot of problems with it. Those two weapons are very hard to use and don't compare in power to something like a Peacemaker, right? So the question was, can we get more stat stick weapons that fill those gaps? Because some builds don't have them to access or use in general. And their response was, we don't like stat stick weapons and may make changes. So they're saying that in general, they may be moving away from the Peacemakers and the Clairvoyances and those kinds of weapons in the future. That begs another bunch of follow-up questions. What does that mean for the builds that rely on them right now, right? So if basically all Valby builds run Peacemaker as a skill buffer, if that goes away, what happens to those builds? All those builds get get worse? What about the weapons that exist? Does that mean you're going to rework their passives so they're no longer a stat stick? And what about the builds that need to be buffed when the absence of those weapons? A lot of follow-up questions come along, but at least they made their intention clear that they don't like stat stick weapons in general, and they may make changes in the future, so be ready for that. Next, a question from Rays, which is one of my burning questions as well, is weapon cores. I mean, he didn't say this specifically, but he's saying that weapon cores are not made equal. And this is one of the problems that I have with two systems in the game, the weapon core system and the arcade tuning system. And that is, there's a lot of, with the weapon core system and the arcade tuning system, very arbitrary decisions made for you by the devs that have a drastic impact on the overall value of a weapon or arcade tuning. So for example, some weapons are really good purely because they have good core slots, right? But everyone knows that if you get, there's some weapons that have 2 purple slots, which is the worst slot by far, gives you almost nothing. There's some weapons that have like 2 purple and like 1 yellow, which means 3 of their slots provide almost nothing for them in general. Same thing for arcade tuning. Like, you know, what goes in these corners, like the slots for these mutant cells are arbitrary and chosen for you by the developer, which means that when you go up here, some mutant cell slots arbitrarily are not going to be available. There are some builds that can't even use defense neutralization because the slots are different for every character. Like it might be Rutile up here and there might be Malachite, and that's chosen for you by the developers arbitrarily and locked in and can't be changed, right? So the question is, are we going to make changes to the ultimate weapons that have bad weapon core distribution, or make changes to the weapons that are the best in the game because they have good weapon core colors? And the answer to that was they don't really plan to rework that system, and it sounds like the Transcendent weapons are not going to have weapon cores, and ultimate weapons are going to become weaker and obsolete over time. And so they probably don't plan to do that, but they did say that they're going to make changes to 2 weapons weapon core slots. So Nazastra's Devotion and Truly Deadly Arson are going to have their weapon core slots reworked to be different colors. There's going to be a lot of questions about that too. Like, what does that mean if you have a fully cored out Nazastra's Devotion and the weapon core slots change? Does that mean that your weapon can't be used until you recore it? Like, is it an invalid weapon? It's a weapon you put a lot of effort and time and resources into. Are you going to be refunded for the weapon cores you put in there? Are you going to give free resources for people that need it? How is that going to work when you change the weapon cores? But they didn't say they're not going to rework the weapon core system. They just said Nazastra's Devotion and Truly Deadly Arson are going to have their cores changed. And that was it. Next was a great question by Elisa, who said, hey, re-rolling weapon cores takes forever. Could we get a UI menu where I say, you know, target 20% fire rate and roll and use as many resources as you need to until you hit 20% fire rate? And the response from the director was, nope. We like it. We like the time that you take right now in the menu, rolling every core one by one. We're happy with that. We're not going to be making any changes. Elisa also asked, will there be new melee weapons or new melee weapon types? And the response was, melee weapons will be getting Transcendent rarity at the end of the year. I believe it's December on the roadmap. And they also mentioned that they are currently working on a lance. So not a sword. So we have the 4 swords in the game right now, or 4 swords in the game right now. They are working on a lance, which it's not, I mean, pole arm weapons take so many forms: glaives, nodachis, spears, javelins, halberds, and lance. Lances usually are heavy and have a tapered effect that comes out, like Daya's lance. So they said there's a lance incoming, so maybe we're gonna get a big old lance that you can just poke people with, like Monster Hunter style. But that is being worked on, and Transcendent melee weapons are coming as well. Vincent asked, can we improve the quality of the Transcendent weapons? And the answer was no. I wonder if they're gonna want to play around with this or not. So you can imagine if like there was a quality stat on an Ancestor module, and when it dropped, it could never get any better. I feel like that probably would not go over well. But Sen was asking, hey, can we, once a Transcendent weapon drops, which if you don't know, the quality of the Transcendent weapon is a percentage or a value that increases the unique ability of that Transcendent weapon. So Kingsguard Lance, it would make the turrets stronger, and Emperor's Guard Lance. So the question was, can you improve that quality stat when the Transcendent weapon drops? And they said no. They want you to be farming lots of Transcendent weapons over and over and over and looking for a good quality base. Now keep in mind, they did mention that the sub stats, which are kind of like weapon cores for the Transcendent weapon, those will be modifiable and re-rollable. It's kind of like weapon cores. And so while the quality, at least they said in this, won't be changeable, you will still be able to improve the power of a Transcendent weapon by getting these sub stats that you can roll, sock it in, and re-roll. Then Sen followed up and said, hey, can we have multiple Transcendent transcendent weapons equipped at once. Right now, you can hold 3 ultimate weapons. Can I hold 3 transcendent weapons? And they said yes. So basically, that's going to be the new tier, the new power creep of you need to have, you know, for every weapon that you're holding, it needs to be transcendent quality with good rolls, good quality, that sort of thing, so that you can get the most power out of those weapons, because they will ultimately, with good rolls, be stronger than ultimate weapons, or at least that's the plan. But at least you aren't limited to 1. You can have 3 and max out all your slots. Then Elise asked, can we get more or improved non-crit modules? Because crit is back to being the king. It's better than non-crit in almost every single build option you have in the game, especially with ancestor modules in the game. So the question was, can we get more non-crit modules? And they just ignored it and moved on. Alyssa also asked, can we get an improvement to grappling hooks and that sub slot? And the answer was yes. So this is really good. Right now, pretty much everyone uses midair grappling, and that's it. There's a whole bunch of melee mods for the sub slot that no one ever used because they're useless. And they said they do have sub slot for that specific module slot improvements coming. So that's pretty exciting. And Elisa asked a question I've had since the game came out, which is, can we get a better module system for making the builds more interesting? So one thing that I always gripe about, I'm sure if you've been watching me for a while, you've heard me say this at least once, but the way I feel the module system is right now is very one-dimensional. There are some characters that come out like Nell and Daya where I had a build for those characters in 4 minutes because they were a crit character, so they got 4 crit modules, and they were a cooldown character, so they got 4 cooldown modules, and they did range, and then they did HP, and now all 10 slots are filled up because there's no other choices. You have to have the 3 or 4 for crit, you have to have the 3 or 4 cooldown, and that takes almost all of your module slots off the board, and it's kind of chosen for you. You don't really have a lot of flexibility with choosing your modules in that way. So the question was, can we get more module variety? And this one could have been a mistranslation. The language barrier is there, so keep that in mind. But the response from the lead content designer was, we plan to reduce the cooldown cap, which, I mean, I guess if they reworked cooldowns, this could help solve that problem as an example, right? If they reworked crit, if they reworked cooldowns, if they reworked some of those stats, they could alleviate that problem. But, and again, this could have been a translation thing, but he said, we plan to reduce the cooldown cap. That as a singular change to me is very concerning because there are a lot of characters like Daya, for example, that needs exactly minus 90% cooldown reduction to be remotely viable. There are some builds like the Freyna unique weapon build. Her unique weapon has like a massive cooldown, like 2-minute cooldown on the ability, which means that if you don't have maximum cooldown reduction, you can't really ever use the unique weapon. And so just simply reducing the cooldown cap would mean that you would free up module slots for other slots, but it also realistically would mean that you would make a lot of builds obsolete or very weak because you took away their cooldown, or it would just mean that people would have to make up for that with their ancestor module to get it there. So I'm hoping that was just a mistranslation, that they meant that they wanted to rework stats like cooldown, like maybe they could lower the cooldown cap and then reduce everyone's cooldowns across the game so you don't need to have so much in your build, and that would help alleviate that, and that's probably the more charitable translation for that as well. They also mentioned that they want to improve gold modules, so the yellow tier modules. Realistically, right now, they're heavily restricted by their category, since you can only have one RK, one RK support yellow module, and a lot of times the power that the yellow modules give is very variable or really small. And there's some that like multi-talented or like hyper-focus that give you a buff, but you have to pay attention to what buff it's giving you, and you have to watch a timer and stuff like that. And you can only have one yellow module, really, maybe 2, depending on which ones you do, but they're heavily restricted and the power they provide is limited. And so they said they want to improve gold mods. Now, you can imagine, going back to the cooldown example, that imagine there was a yellow module that gave you 90% cooldown reduction. That would obviously open up more module slots, because then you could get your max cooldown from one yellow module, and then you could remove your focus modules, take away nimble, take away MP conversion, and all of a sudden you have more slots to play with. So that could be another way to help with that as well. And they also mentioned that the second major patch for Season 4, which he called 4.1, but a .1 just means they're going into Season 4, and not the first Season 4 patch, so maybe September, like September time would be, like September, maybe, yeah, September probably, September or October, they would look to do some changes for yellow modules and maybe play around the stats to improve the module thing. So comment below what you think the changes should be to the module system to improve it, but that was at least the take that they gave. Ariana also had some comments, more gameplay specific things. He asked, can we raise the level the maximum enhancement level of modules so they can get stronger? And the answer was nope, they have no plans for that. He also asked, can we get trigger modules that aren't based on just damage? Like almost all of the trigger modules in the game do a thing that deals damage. They spawn a field that does damage, or they do a thing that does damage, or they attack and deal damage, or it does a pulsing poison field that does damage. So basically all the trigger modules in the game focus on dealing damage. So his point was, can we get some that may not necessarily do that? Like maybe there are more utility focused trigger modules in the game, and the response was, we'll consider it. Another interesting question Seven brought up, which was, can we not do element transforming trigger modules? And this is actually kind of an interesting discussion. They didn't walk away with a solution or an answer here, but you can think about this for yourself. So what Seven is talking about here is, like, for example, when we had current bonding added to the game. Current bonding, a trigger module that deals your reactor's damage to the target. And with the advent of modules like that, it meant that non-electric characters could do electric damage as part of that, right? And he was saying that that can cause problems because why is Luna doing more electric damage than Bunny or Inez, right? Why, like, that seems kind of weird, and they're breaking out of the mold. And I kind of expected them to say, okay, maybe we can think about that sort of thing, but they actually did go into an interesting discussion here, which was, their point was a gun-based Descendant can change elements freely, right? So if you're running a Serena or a Glay that's a true gun Descendant, not the hybrids that we've seen, but a true gun Descendant, you can change elements all you want. You can run Executor if you need to do damage. You can run Fallen Hope. You can run Hive Master. You can run Restored Relic. You can change elements all you want all day long because you have access to all the weapons in the game, and some weapons have elements tied to them that do specific elements. So when they added those trigger modules, they were kind of thinking maybe we could offer or extend that opportunity to skill-based builds as well to give them more freedom to change elements. And it's kind of an interesting discussion. You could definitely make an argument that maybe this makes skill Descendants too flexible so that when you see that, you know, a new toxic-based boss, Abyss boss launches, you don't rush to go play an electric Descendant. Maybe you play a non-attribute Descendant that deals electric damage, right? And maybe that gives too much flexibility. But I'm curious what you think. Drop that down below. Do you think skill Descendants should be able to change their element through modules if they want to, or do you feel like that should be a hard line that helps keep the character identity in one place? Sen asked another great question, which was, can we rework arcade tuning? I talked a little bit earlier about how I don't like the mutant cell restriction and the slots on it. There's also a bunch of problems with the arcade tuning board that I think could be addressed as well. I already mentioned the slot restrictions, but I also think that there needs to be more flexibility. I mean, this is basically a trimmed down version of the Paragon board that we have in Diablo 4, and then some of the skill trees you see in like very big RPGs or ARPGs, that sort of thing, but it's got a lot of stuff missing from it. And one thing I'd like, you know, a couple things I'd like to see them do, make it so we can change the slot on these arbitrary cell slots so that some builds get screwed over because they can't run the cell that they need in the build that they want. But I also think that, you know, for the longest time, we had characters that didn't even have MP, like Luna or something like that, or like Kyle. Like Kyle could pick up MP in his arcade tuning board even though he doesn't have any, right? Or Glay, like Glay doesn't have any, so why does Glay get MP in this as well? I think what they need to do with this is they need to give us more flexibility in choosing where things go, and ARPGs and RPGs solve this problem by giving you choice nodes, which means you click on this, and maybe you can come down here and then you can click on this button, and when you select it, it pops up to a choice. And maybe instead of this being forced to be shield in the bottom left, maybe this is just a defensive node when you click on it and you can choose shield, defense, or HP, right? Things like that would give you more flexibility. It doesn't force you and pigeonhole you into one corner where you may not even get the slot that you want. That would be a cool way to change. And I also think they could probably even add like minor mutant cell slots closer to the center, or just give us new ways to play around with it. So the answer they gave with that was, we will add new play styles to the arcade tuning board. That was the words they chose, or at least the translator chose those. And they said they have nothing to share right now. Moving on to cosmetics. This was a pretty big category and super fun as well. And they were just talking a lot about the skin system, dye system, color system, skin pricing, and all that stuff. So let's just rapid fire some of the responses they had for cosmetics. The first thing that LBG asked was, can we get cheaper skins or maybe more skin tiers, right? We have purple, and then we have like the 750, and then we have like the 1200s or whatever, and then it goes up to like the $100 skins or whatever. But could we get some blue, you know, lower tier qualities or more pricing changes and things like that? So can we get some cheaper skins? And the answer was no. Then he asked, can we get more universal skins? And the community has been back and forth on this like since the game came out. Some people like universal skins because they don't They don't want to know what character they're going to play ahead of time, right? You buy a skin for Freyna and then Freyna gets reworked and you don't like it. Now you don't play Freyna anymore and you can't use that skin. And some people like the specific skins because they feel like if everyone can wear it, it loses its specialness and its value. So his question was, can we get more universal skins? And they said they're working on some. Another question, which was a great one, which is, can we get more head skins? I'm the kind of person that, like, I would literally just buy hairstyles instead of the whole skin. They keep the skins as one pack. Sometimes they'll sell individual heads or give us through events and you get makeup and stuff like that, but usually you have to buy the entire skin to get the headpiece. In a lot of cases, there are some skins that I would only want the headpiece. I don't care about the skin at all. So the question was, can we get more head skins? And the response was a kind of maybe. There was also a question on, can we, remember when they did the Ultimate Freyna and they gave us an option of Ultimate Freyna to not have the mask on? So he was saying, can we get more face masks removed so we can have more flexibility there? And they didn't answer, so I'm guessing the answer is no. The natural segue to that one is, can we get more evolving skins? Because they have not done one in quite a while, and then a lot of them were very cool. I think the problem with the evolving skins is the price didn't match the value return, so it was a much more expensive skin for them to make, but also no one wanted to buy it because the price was way out of line. Also, some of the skins, like the Valby evolving skin, all of the variants were very similar together, and so there's definitely some questions on whether that's there. So the question was, can we get more evolving skins? And the answer was no, we're not planning to do any more evolving skins. I'm guessing the value proposition didn't make sense for them. They couldn't justify the extra cost, which, to be fair, a lot of the evolving skins were just minor changes on one format. I can't imagine it was that much more expensive to make an evolving skin, but obviously it's extra work and things to put into it. But they did say that they are working on more customizable skins, which is, they mentioned this specifically, but on some of the Descendants, like Harris and Serena, you can toggle parts of their kit that might be distracting or in the way. I imagine they're going to extend this system to also apply to specific skins. So what would be really cool that you can do in other games is put the visor up and down, put the hair up and down, put the hood up and down. Like maybe you could actually have that. There are some skins that like the adventurer skin, like this one has a hood on it, so like maybe you could have one where you could put the hood up or down, up or down. They're working on customizable skins that are like that. They don't have anything to share right now, but they are working on it, so you can look forward to that. Ariana asked a question, which was, can we use group emotes in photo mode? And they said they don't have short-term plan for that. He also asked, can we get a toggleable option for accessories on hair? So maybe there's like a hair clip or like an eye patch, or there's like a headband or something, or the bunny ears on the casino skins. Can we get a toggleable option to turn that on and off? And the response was, it'll be a skin-by-skin basis. He also asked, can we have and display our ancestor mods in the lounge, like a stack of Pokemon cards or displayed on a giant wall or something like that? They said they will consider it. And they also did mention that they will be returning some skins, including last year's bikini skins at some point as well, which might be coming up in a couple days here as well, so keep that in mind. Sen asked if we can get gifting in the game. So can I gift a friend caliber? Can I gift a friend a skin that is in the game? And the answer was no short-term plan. Just like the trading system, gifting is an avenue for abuse for RMTers and bots and scammers. So they could, they can get a hold of some caliber, gift that caliber to another account to remove the trace, right, of like that sort of thing. It puts extra effort and extra strain on customer service to keep up with that. So they have no short-term plan of adding gifting, though it would be really cool. Then Elisa asked, could we get more gameplay earnable skins or free skins? And their answer was they will continue doing some free skins in the events and the login rewards, and they also will continue doing Abyss skins. So at some point, when they add another Abyss boss, they haven't done that for a while. They kind of added the ones they have, and now they're just rotating the existing ones. But if they do add another Abyss boss, when they do add another Abyss boss, that will come with new gameplay earnable skins. He also asked, could we do an improvement to the paint/dyeing system? I think this is something a lot of people have gripes with, especially when you have other games out there in the universe that might be able to buy an entire paint palette that you can use in perpetuity if there were a game out there that did that, right? And there's plenty of other games that allow you to, like in Lost Ark, you can literally bring up a hexadecimal slider like you can in Photoshop and choose your color on the fly with a skin that you've already paid for. Like you bought the skin, they let you change the color however you want. There's a lot of other fair and simple systems that work way better than the dye system in the game right now. And the response to this was they are actually doing R&D internally to vet out ideas. They have no short-term plans. And they did mention that the dye system changing, at least in the way they've set this up, has optimization issues. And anyone that works in software knows, even if it may not make sense, like you might be thinking, why would changing the dye system have optimization issues? The cool part about software is software can do anything. The bad part about software is software can do anything. So it can do anything you want, but it also can have crazy bugs and problems with it. So they mentioned that changing the die system is on their long-term plan. They're thinking about it. They're testing stuff, but they have nothing to share. Then and Elisa, he just went out and said it. He said it. He said it. He probably got canceled for it, but he said it. He asked, can we get more skins with more clothing on? He said it out loud on the broadcast. And the response from the developers was, in short form, the way that the creative director, the toe guy who smiles when they talk about feet, he said, when a skin concept has less exposure, he said that both internally and externally outside the studio, that skin gets less hype, which means they don't like making skins that have less exposure. So that is the answer from the creative director, which I know there's gonna be a mix of things. I think the majority of the people that gravitate towards TFD like the risque aspect of it, especially since a lot of other games are very tame or very kind of like prim and proper. And so having a game that breaks those molds is refreshing to a lot of people. But I also do feel, at least personally, I know this is not a popular opinion, but I think that they lean a little bit too much on just exposing as much skin as possible. And I feel like that they could play around, like, you know, anyone that likes fashion knows, especially if you're, you know, having, sometimes the things you don't show are just as sexy as the things that you do show. So having more skins that have pants, especially if they have like some asymmetry or choice showing of skin and exposure, things like that, that can be just as alluring and sexy as just having a bikini, right? We have tons of bikinis. It would be nice, I agree, to play around with shapes and colors and silhouettes in ways that can be just as sexy, that aren't just, you know, as much skin showing as possible. But again, I know that's not the popular opinion. I know some people disagree with me on that one, but I'm glad that this question was at least asked so we can see what the developer thinks. Another question Descendant asked, which I kind of debated on whether this should be in here or not, but I guess it's probably better if people know. Their question was, the trailer for season 4 shows Albion being invaded, and I'm just gonna phrase it this way: will there be a new hub for the Descendants? And the answer was no. So obviously that's a bit of a spoiler. Hopefully that doesn't upset anybody, but there will not be a new hub for season 4. We don't know what's going to happen as part of the story, but Albion will not be wiped off the map is the answer. Next was like our Luna toe paint level meme question that was asked, but Ariana asked, is Valby going to get a boyfriend? So we know that Enzo and Nell are, like, you know, kind of thinking about getting engaged, romantically entangled. And he asked, like, you know, are Valby and Eugen gonna hook up? Like, they kind of have that vibe going on? Like, what's going on there? And the answer was no, and they said not yet. And they talked a lot about how they want the characters to have drama between them and interconnectivity and stuff like that. But they said that it won't always be romantic, and that's all that they mentioned. The next question by Seven was a great one, and one I think that they would benefit on greatly. And I think this one actually got lost in translation a little bit, or maybe he just didn't want to answer the question. So Seven said, can we get more public playtests? We got a demo and early access to the launch of season 3 with Axion Planes, but they have never done that since. And most live service online games have a public test realm, a PTR, PTS, PTB, whatever you want to call it. In development, we call it a staging environment. So it is an environment that we branch from development, dev, and we put it in the staging environment to move things, because this does a lot of things. One, it allows players to test things out. They can try modules, they can try builds. We would have caught a lot of problems that the game had before the patch went live. We would have caught current bonding. We would have caught the Glay problem. We would have caught the Inez problem if players could play the public test server or whatever. But also in software development, anytime you move a build from one environment to another, there's always unpredictable bugs that come out. And there are large amounts of bugs over the last 2 years that have only presented themselves in TFD when the build got moved to a new environment. So when they took a dev build and they shipped it to live inside of TFD, a brand new bug that I'm certain didn't exist in dev spawned out of that. And that's why developers use staging environments. And so you could go through the process of taking a build from one environment to another and see what bugs come out. So usually bigger studios, or most game studios that are live service, will get their dev branch, move it to a staging environment like a PTS, and then they'll re-QA it to see, okay, so what broke? when we moved environments, what broke. And so we got the ones where current bonding was broken, the one where the explosive aesthetics current module was broken. There's tons of bugs that show up when you do that. So Seven's saying, can we get more public playtests? I think in his mind, he's saying, can we actually test some of the changes you're putting out before you ship them? Because there's a lot of balancing problems that comes from this, and we'd be happy to do it for free and give feedback. But also from a software perspective, it would be good for them to have a staging environment. So he was saying, can we get more public playtests? And the answer from the creative director was no, we're not planning to do that. And his response was a very generic, we plan to add more QA internally, that sort of thing. I don't think Seven, who is a competitive-minded player, was asking, can you fix more bugs? I think he was asking, can we get access to the builds before you ship them so that we can give feedback on their relevancy inside of the game, because we know the game really well, which I think would go a long way to make the game better overall for multiple reasons that we just listed. But the response to the creative director was, nope, we're not planning any more public tests. We're not planning on getting a test realm or test server or staging environment. We're just gonna do more QA internally. So there's your answer there. And the final question that we have here is, can we get an increase to the friends list? And the answer was, don't know, need to test. This may sound strange to some people, but friends lists can actually be non-performant. In a game that I played before, Smite, my friends list, I did a thing where I would accept every friend request. I got my friends list up over, I think it was like 100,000 friends or something like that. And anytime I opened my friends list in Smite, my game would crash. So there are performance impacts for having a friends list. The 100-player friends list is small by most game terms, but they said, don't know, they're gonna test and see if they can increase it. So that's that answer there. So there's the whole Q&A. I tried to make it as short as possible and just kind of stitch it together. So hopefully this video doesn't turn out to be too long, but obviously I think it's gonna be a little bit easier than the bouncing around and the chaos that we had for the Q&A, and obviously it's overall shorter than the total Q&A. So hopefully this was interesting for you, a little summation of what's going on. Let me know what your thoughts are, and also if there are other questions that you wish were asked to the developers during this broadcast, put those down in the comments below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.
โอเคได้ความรู้เยอะเลยไอ้เหี้ยก็เดี๋ยววันนี้ไว้เท่านี้แหละมาดูให้มันรู้เรื่องจริงๆก่อนแพทใหญ่จะมาแพทซีซั่น4ก็เดี๋ยวเจอกันครับเจอกันในไลฟ์